adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and Friends. Starring that jetty Jerry O'Lace, Rocket J. Squirrel, and his pal, Bullwinkle the Moose.
Hi, glad to see you again.
Likewise.
We got some great things on the show today.
Like what? Like what?
Well, you ought to know, Bullwinkle. You're in some of them.
Well, let's get started.
Well, last time you remember, Boris Badenov had got hold of the Kerward Derby, whose wearer becomes the smartest man on earth.
At last the world is mine!
But there was one other claimant for the diabolical Derby in the person of Fearless Leader. He had the drop on Boris until Natasha crept up behind him and...
Oh!
But as the two villains pummeled each other furiously, one of them happened to kick the Kerwood Derby, and unbeknownst to them, it rolled blithely downhill to where our friend sat dejectedly trying to get results from a bogus bowler.
You sure you don't feel smart, Bullwinkle?
Ask me something.
Okay. How many states in the United States?
I mean something easy.
Spell Mississippi.
Let's see. M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-S-S.
Oh, Bullwinkle.
It's a long river, you know.
Something's wrong with your magic hat.
Oh, if Rocky only knew, for Boris had switched derbies with Bullwinkle and given him one that contained a small but effective time bomb.
Doesn't the hat say anything to you at all?
Just tick, tick, tick.
Well, that's no help.
Sure not.
But at that moment, the real Kerwood Derby rolled past them. In a twinkling, Rocky had caught up with a hopping headpiece and brought it back to Bullwinkle.
Try me now, Rock.
What's the longest word in the English language?
Anti-disestablishmentarianism. What else?
That's it!
On the other hand, the longest word in Latin is honorificabilitudinatatibus.
Wow! You better take it off, Bullwinkle.
How come?
Your head's beginning to smoke again.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we don't need this one anymore.
And Rocky lightly tossed away the bomb-filled bowler. By chance, it skimmed through the air and landed right at the feet of Natasha Fatal.
I wear the derby.
No, I wear the derby.
Natasha, are you a loyal Pennsylvanian?
You know it, fearless leader.
Then your duty is clear.
Naturally, darling.
And Natasha picked up a nearby tree branch and clouted Fearless Leader.
Honey bun, you did it. But I thought you were loyal Pennsylvanian.
Right, Boris. And first duty of any Pennsylvanian is
Double-cross everybody. And now for my moment of triumph, I put on derby and become smartest man in world.
Well, darling.
Well, I'm waiting. Something's bound to happen soon.
And it did.
Boris, it exploded.
Good guess.
What we do now?
You know, I've been thinking of applying for civil service job.
Boris, what civil service job could you do?
I could start civil wars.
And it looks like you're beginning already.
Sure enough, it seemed that Fearless Leader had recovered from his blow on the noggin.
Well, bad enough, I'm glad to find out at last what a renegade you are.
What a what?
Renegade, darling, is nice way of saying you're a fink.
Me?
But you won't be for long.
You are going to liquidate me after I saved your life?
Another trick, bad enough?
No, look at Derby. It was really a bomb.
So that is why you wanted to put it on first.
Of course, old boss man lover pumpkin lamby pie. I didn't want anything to happen to my beloved superior.
Stop drooling on my knuckles, bad enough. You're giving me rheumatism.
So you wouldn't knock off loyal old me, would you?
Bad enough, are you really loyal?
If I'm not, may lightning strike me this minute. See, it missed me.
Very well, bad enough. I give you one more chance to get the Kerwood Derby.
That's all I need. I got new plan.
What is it, darling?
I can't tell you.
It's too terrible to mention, yes?
No.
Then why can't you tell me?
Because episode is over.
So it is. Be with us next time for A Snitch in Time or The Thinking Man's Filter.
There was once a handsome young prince named John, and where one finds a handsome young prince, one is most certain to find a beautiful young princess. Her name was Tinsel, and they were very much in love.
I love you, John.
I love you, Tinsel.
They were never happy unless they were together.
Oh, I'm so unhappy.
Peekaboo, guess whom?
Oh, now I'm happy.
Day after day, they went out hunting or fishing. Night after night, they went to balls at the funny house at the beach. They sang and danced and ate sugar plums out of the same dish. They shared delicate secrets together.
How much money do you have?
Oh, 100 million grinkles. Give or take 1,000 or so.
Va-va-voom, that's a lot of grinkles.
You can say that again.
Va-va-voom, that's a lot of grinkles.
Then finally, as everyone knew they would, they were married. And they moved into a beautiful white castle high on a green hill. They were so full of joy that everybody called it the happy house.
I'm so happy.
That is, everybody but one, an evil old witch named Grumpyra, who hated happiness.
It's disgusting. I'll put a stop to it if it's the last thing I do.
Then, taking a basket of poison apples, she hurried off to the castle.
Who is it, dear?
That's an old hag with mussed-up hair selling apples.
Apples?
Yes, you know. The poison kind that you take a bite of and they put you to sleep for 1,000,000 years.
Oh, well, tell her we don't want any.
We don't want any.
With that, the witch was roughly thrown from the castle. And once again, happiness echoed from within. By now, Grumpyra was near the breaking point, and storming back to her cave, she took a huge black kettle and set herself to the task of concocting a mysterious, evil-smelling brew.
Now, where did I put the gruffy dust? Oh, yes, here it is. A pinch of this and a pinch of that. A dewy button and a French fried bat. Oh, these bitches' brews are murder, but what are you going to do?
A short time later, she had finished and hurried off to the castle, where she stole into the garden and sprayed every rose with the strange mixture.
It's done. Now, when the princess comes into the garden to pick roses...
Oh, the garden is beautiful today. I shall pick some roses for my prince.
She will prick her finger... Ouch! And turn into an ogre!
And when the beautiful young princess, who was now an ugly old ogre, went into the castle...
Hello, dear. Wearing your hair a little differently, aren't you?
It's worse than that. I turned into an ogre.
A closer look told the prince that what she said was true, and this made him very unhappy. The old witch's plan had worked, for the castle was now the saddest place on earth. Now the story would have ended right there, but for one thing. Ogres love to cook, and that night, when John's ogre wife set his evening meal in front of him, it was the most magnificent food he had ever tasted.
Dear, it. That was the best meal I ever had.
So pleased was the wife by the compliment that she went right back into the kitchen and cooked some more. And before long, being so full of fine food made the prince happy. This, of course, made the ogre happy, and once again, happiness rang from the castle. Grumpyra, of course, wasted no time in flying back to the castle to see what had gone wrong.
Say, laughing boy, how can you possibly be happy with an ogre for a wife?
Well, it's the food it cooks. Have a bite?
Say, that is tasty.
Join me?
Love to?
They both dug in and ate all John's ogre wife could cook, and she cooked all they could eat. The food was so good that even Grumpyra, for the first time in her life, was happy.
You know, she's such a good cook that I could kiss her.
Oh, no, you must never do that, boy.
All right, but why not?
Because if a handsome prince kisses her, it will break the spell, and she will turn back into a beautiful princess who can't cook for sour apples.
She? Oh, I'm glad you told me.
As a precaution against ever kissing the ogre by mistake, the prince let his beard grow and wore a gag over his mouth whenever he wasn't eating. Things were well and happy for a score of years, until one day, when John's ogre wife was giving some scraps to their pet dog, he affectionately licked her face, and she instantly turned back into the beautiful princess.
What happened?
The dog kissed her.
You don't mean...
I'm afraid so. His name is Prince.
That meant an end to the good cooking, and the prince and the witch were frantic.
Doesn't it make you happy that I'm beautiful again, John?
Quiet. Do you remember what you did?
I think so. Come on.
Now, having an ogre for a wife has its drawbacks, but John was happy that way. And very soon thereafter,
A pinch of this, a pinch of that, a Dewey button, and a French fried cat.
John was to be very happy once again.
And now for all of you who like to think big, here's Mr. Know-It-All.
Hello, you big thinkers, you. Today's lecture is entitled Falling Asleep on the Job Can Lead to a Rude Awakening, or Don't Be a Somnambulist Chaser. Let us suppose first that you are an admiral in the army doing sentry duty. The condition is red, and so are your eyeballs from lack of sleep. Falling asleep here would mean you'd lose your good conduct ribbon. The best way to stay awake is rush inside the nearest shack and light a cigarette. Preferably a candy cigarette. Next, we shall take a situation often faced by test pilots. You find yourself in the latest model, with your speedometer reading half full. You are ready to go into a screaming dive. After you land, right now it is your job to break the sound barrier, or at least bend it a little. You turn on your radio and contact the tower. This is Red Letter Day, calling disabled Baker Charlie. Mayday, over. You discover to your disgust that disabled Baker Charlie has gone into a screaming dive to wait for you. Anxious to get this over with, you throw the ship into a screaming dive. Hiya, fellas. Now I ask you, who could sleep in here?
Thank you, Mr. Know-It-All, for showing us how to stay awake.
Today's lesson is mighty important, remember?
Bullwinkle is a...
Not that lesson. This lesson.
Niagara Falls, and sometimes it doesn't. One of the times it didn't was back in the year 1901. There it was, pouring itself all over the place, and then suddenly, without warning, honeymoon couples from all over the world stood transfixed. Who was responsible for this black deed? Who turned the tap on this great natural wonder?
That little old fall maker, me.
Yes, Snidely Whiplash.
And they said Kansas was dry.
Whiplash had concocted a diabolical scheme to undermine Canada's economy. From a travel booth at the bottom of the now dry falls.
Honeymooners, listen to me. Don't spend your money in Canada. Come to beautiful Okefenokee Swamp in the lush Florida Everglades. Don't let old acquaintance be for cottonmouths.
Scores of couples disappointed by Niagara's inactivity rushed to the charlatan.
No pushing. Steady there. No, sir, I'm only selling one-way tickets.
Sooner or later, word of this was bound to reach the mounted police.
Do right. All the honeymooners are going to Florida.
Tell me you are joshing, Inspector.
Oh, wish I were.
We must do something.
Right. You and Nell get married and leave for Florida in the morning. This is too good a deal to pass up.
Nell who, sir?
Nell, my daughter, that's who. Send Nell in here.
You call, Daddy dear?
You don't have to salute Nell. Just stand at attention.
Ah, Nell, you grow fairer each day.
This is Nell Do-Right. I'm the inspector.
Well, you grow fairer too, sir.
Nell, how would you like to marry Dudley?
Dudley who?
Dudley Do-Right. Send Do-Right in here.
I am in here.
Oh, I think it would be fun, Daddy, especially if we honeymoon in Niagara.
How about Florida?
No, my Canadian heart is set on Niagara.
That settles it, Do-Right. Go to Niagara and undam the river. Once the falls start falling, you and Nell can be married.
Nell who?
Constable Do-Right wasted no time in getting to Niagara. He arrived just as Snidely Whiplash was making the dam even more secure than ever.
You up there! Drop that rock!
When our hero awoke, he found himself tied to a railroad track. and the 1202 was on its way.
Whiplash, you black-hearted scoundrel, what are you up to besides no good?
It's a new game called Eraser in which I get to rub you out.
When I said the 1202 was on its way, I meant on its way to Alaska. You see, it had already passed the spot where Dudley was tied.
I don't understand it. You should have been run over by now.
Cheer up, another one will come along.
The next train's due at 1945.
Is that an hour?
No, it's a year.
Dudley was all for waiting, but Snidely wasn't one for taking things lying down. He picked up his victim and set off for the St. Lawrence River. Once there, he promptly booked passage on the first steamboat leaving for Alaska.
What you going to Alaska for? To catch a train. Oh, and if any messages come for Constable Do-Right, tell him he's all tied up.
The steamboat eventually dropped anchor in the harbor of Nome.
Well, Do-Right, according to my calculations, the 1202 from Quebec will be pulling into Nome any second. Come, we must find a deserted stretch of track.
How about this, Snidely? This looks good.
Now, you make the choice. After all, you're going to be tied to it.
Oh, this will do fine, then.
You know something? I could like you if it weren't for your sense of justice and fair play. Why don't you rotten up like me?
Oh, I could never do that. Hark! Better stand back or I'll miss my train.
This was it then. This was our valiant hero's swan song. His future would all be past. Nevermore would his innate goodness roam the Canadian wilds. Nevermore.
Gad, methinks I feel a twinge of pity.
Goodbye, Mr. Whiplash.
Some foreign feeling beats within me heart and breast. Do I feel the pangs of guilt?
Tell Mumsy how I went.
I can't do it! I can't!
And with that, Whiplash pulled the switch, and the speeding train swerved onto another track.
You couldn't kill me, could you?
No, I suppose I'm just an old softy.
Thank you, Mr. Whiplash.
Say no more, just go. I want to be left alone to think, ponder, reflect.
I can hardly believe my ears, Inspector.
It's true. The city of Niagara condemned the dam and had it destroyed. Niagara Falls are falling.
That means Nell and I can be married.
Nell who?
Well, fortune in the form of a strong breeze smiled once again on our heroes as it practically blew the Kerwood Derby into their laps. Now Bullwinkle is once more a mental marvel, the smartest moose in the world.
Or even in the US of A, which is bigger.
That is, when he's wearing the Derby.
The energy factors in electromagnetic quanta are proportionate to the wavelength of radiation.
But there's one drawback to wearing the Derby.
My brains keep overheating.
In the meantime, Boris and Natasha had been given one last chance to get the fabulous bowler back.
You see this box big enough?
Yes, fearless leader.
At noon, I send it to Pennsylvania with Kerwood Derby inside.
Suppose I don't get Derby.
I send it back with you inside.
But I wouldn't be able to breathe in there.
Believe me, that will be the least of your problems.
You mean?
Jawohl, you won't be breathing.
Oh, boy.
Boris, he's not kidding.
You're not kidding, he's not kidding. Come on.
And the two villains set off on their last desperate attempt to thwart our heroes, who were at that moment wondering what to do with the Derby.
Bullwinkle, there's only one place that hat should be.
On a hat rack!
We gotta take it to Washington.
He never wears a derby.
No, I mean...
Usually he wears a wig.
Bullwinkle!
Besides, he's not with us anymore, you know.
Bullwinkle!
He's gone to the big cherry orchard in the sky.
I don't mean George Washington. I mean Washington, D.C.
Oh, him!
That derby should be worn by the heads of government.
Say, that's right.
Now, how do we get to Washington from here? We're broke.
Beats me.
Put on the hat and see if you can get an idea.
Okay, let's see. Well, obviously the best way to get to Washington is run for office and be elected.
Bullwinkle, it worked.
You did? What'd I say?
We're going to run as candidates.
All the way to Washington?
No. Come on, I'll show you.
Rocky and Bullwinkle started their campaign. First, they held a rally of the Hatful clan.
And if I'm elected, I'll drive every Floy out of the county.
Next, they held a rally for the Floy clan.
And if I'm elected, I promise to drive every hatful out of the county.
You're going to be quiet around here after the election.
As a result, before the day was over, Rocky had been unanimously elected as a representative from Peaceful Valley, Missouri, and was on his way to Washington.
Traveling first class, too.
Yep, first class freight.
Boris, they are getting away.
Of course, but the Derby won. Yes, at that moment, Rocky asked,
When will we arrive in Washington, Bullwinkle?
Wait, I'll put on my demon derby and come up with the answer.
Boris prepared to hurl a strange weapon.
He's a boomerang, Natasha.
Darling, you can throw a boomerang.
In a perfect cycle, Natasha. Watch.
And just as Bullwinkle began to speak,
We'll arrive in Washington on
the boomerang neatly lifted the derby from his head.
Go on, Bullwinkle.
Go on where?
When do we get there?
Why, ask me.
'Cause you're wearing the Kerwood Derby on your head and... Hokey smoke, it's gone!
My head?
The hat!
Oh, I'm glad it wasn't my head. I wouldn't have nothing to hang my antlers on.
The wind must have blown it off! Stop the train!
Well, here it comes, darling. Oh, Boris, you're such a dirty crook.
You're just saying this because you know it's true.
Where did you learn to throw boomerang?
Where else? Australia, where I spent 2 years living with the kangaroos.
You were a naturalist.
No, a pickpocket.
Well, it looks as if our bad guys have won at last. But anyway, watch our next gloomy episode, Boomerang Bowler, or Boris Makes a Comeback.
Well, I guess that about wraps up another Rocky show.
Certainly hope you enjoyed it. I did. I always say.
Bullwinkle, time for us to go.
Already? Okay, but first, here are some of the people who made this show impossible.
That's not all.
My fingers get tired. Oop! Got away from me again.
Well, see you next time. Ready, Bullwinkle?